This trope has hardly been purged from contemporary liberalism. Every day we hear about the war on cancer, the war on drugs, the war on poverty, and exhortations to make this or that social challenge the moral equivalent of war. From health care to gun control to global warming, liberals insist that we need to get beyond politics and put ideological differences behind us in order to do the people's business. The experts and scientists know what to do, we are told, therefore the time for debate is over. This, albeit in a nicer and more benign form, is the logic of fascism, and it was on ample display in the administrations of Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, and yes, even John F. Kennedy. Then, of course, there's racism. Racism was indisputably central to Nazi ideology. Today, we are perfectly comfortable equating racism and Nazism, and in important respects, that's absolutely appropriate. But why not equate Nazism and, say, Afrocentrism? Many early Afrocentrists, like Marcus Garvey, were pro-fascist or openly identified themselves as fascists. The Nation of Islam has surprising ties to Nazism, and its theology is Himmleresque. The Black Panthers, a militaristic cadre of young men dedicated to violence, separatism, and racial superiority, are as quintessentially fascist as Hitler's brown shirts or Mussolini's action squads. The Afrocentrist writer Leonard Jeffries, blacks are sun people and whites are ice people, could easily be mistaken for a Nazi theorist. Certain quarters of the left assert that Zionism equals racism and that Israelis are equivalent to Nazis. As invidious and problematic as those comparisons are, why aren't we hearing similar denunciations of groups ranging from the National Council of La Raza, that is, the race, to the radical Hispanic group MECHA, whose motto, Por la raza todo, fuera de la raza nada, means everything for the race, nothing outside the race? Why is it that when a white man spouts such sentiments, it's objectively fascist, but when a person of color says the same thing, it's merely an expression of fashionable multiculturalism? The most important priority for the left is not to offer any answer at all to such questions. They would prefer to maintain Orwell's definition of fascism as anything not desirable, thus excluding their own fascistic proclivities from inquiring eyes. When they are forced to answer, however, the response is usually more instinctive, visceral, or dismissively mocking than rational or principled. Their logic seems to be that multiculturalism, the Peace Corps, and such are good things, things that liberals approve of, and good things can't be fascist by simple virtue of the fact that liberals approve of them. Indeed, this seems to be the irreducible argument of countless writers who glibly use the word fascist to describe the bad guys, based on no other criteria than that liberals think they are bad. Fidel Castro, one could argue, is a textbook fascist, but because the left approves of his resistance to U.S. imperialism and because he uses the abracadabra words of Marxism, it's not just wrong, but objectively stupid to call him a fascist. Meanwhile, calling Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, Rudy Giuliani, and other conservatives fascists is simply what right-thinking, sophisticated people do. The major flaw in all of this is that fascism, properly understood, is not a phenomenon of the right at all. Instead, it is, and always has been, a phenomenon of the left. This fact, an inconvenient truth, if there ever was one, is obscured in our time by the equally mistaken belief that fascism and communism are opposites. In reality, they're closely related, historical competitors for the same constituents, seeking to dominate and control the same social space. The fact that they appear as polar opposites is a trick of intellectual history and, more to the point, the result of a concerted propaganda effort on the part of the Reds to make the Browns appear objectively evil and other. Ironically, demonization of the other is counted as a definitional trait of fascism. But in terms of their theory and practice, the differences are minimal. It's difficult now, in the light of their massive crimes and failures, to remember that both fascism and communism were, in their time, utopian visions and the bearers of great hopes. What's more, fascism, like communism, was an international movement that attracted adherents in every Western society, particularly in the aftermath of World War I, but beginning much earlier. A fascist moment arose on the ashes of the old European order. It drew together the various strands of European politics and culture, the rise of ethnic nationalism, the Bismarckian welfare state, and the collapse of Christianity as a source of social and political orthodoxy and universal aspirations. In place of Christianity, it offered a new religion of the divinized state and the nation as an organic community. This international movement had many variants and offshoots and went by different names in different countries. Its expression in different societies varied depending on national culture. This is one of the reasons it's so hard to define, but in reality, international fascism drew from the same intellectual wellsprings as American progressivism. Indeed, American progressivism, the moralistic social crusade from which modern liberals proudly claim descent, is in some respects the major source of the fascist ideas applied in Europe by Mussolini and Hitler. Americans like to think of themselves as being immune to fascism while constantly feeling threatened by it. "It can't happen here" is the common refrain. But fascism definitely has a history in this country, and that's what this book is about. The American fascist tradition is deeply bound up with the effort to Europeanize America and give it a modern state that can be harnessed to utopian ends. This American fascism seems and is very different from its European variants because it was moderated by many special factors: geographical size, ethnic diversity, Jeffersonian individualism, a strong liberal tradition, and so on. As a result, American fascism is milder, more friendly, more maternal than its foreign counterparts. It's what George Carlin calls smiley face fascism, nice fascism. The best term to describe it is liberal fascism, and this liberal fascism was and remains fundamentally left-wing. This book will